The human soldier stumbled through the thick smoke, his breathing rough inside the broken helmet. His ship had crashed only hours ago, and now he was moving through unknown ground with nothing but his knife and a half-burned rifle. The forest around him was alive with strange cries. Alien birds with glowing wings flew between trees, and the air carried a heavy metallic taste. He kept moving, hoping to find water, maybe even signs of life. He had no idea that the choice he was about to make would change everything. Through the mist, he heard a scream. It was not the scream of an animal. It was desperate, human-like, filled with pain and fear. He froze, listening. Again it came, high and sharp. Without thinking, he ran toward the sound. His boots hit the mud, branches tore at his uniform, but he pushed harder. When he reached a clearing, his eyes widened. A group of armored raiders circled a young alien woman. She was chained to a post, her silver skin glowing faintly under the firelight. Her wide eyes were wet with tears, and her hands trembled as the raiders jeered at her. They spoke in rough tones, their weapons flashing, as if preparing for something dark. The human soldier pressed himself against a tree. He should have walked away, he told himself. This was not his fight. He was stranded, with little food and no allies. But the woman's eyes caught his, and even from a distance he felt her silent plea. She wanted to live. She wanted to be saved. His heart tightened, and before his mind could stop him, his body moved. He crouched low, checked his rifle, and counted the raiders. 5 of them, large and confident. His rifle had only 2 charges left. He muttered under his breath, 2 shots, then the knife. He stepped from the shadows. The first shot hit true, the beam cutting through the chest of the closest raider. The second followed instantly, and another raider fell with a scream. The camp exploded in chaos. The remaining 3 roared, their weapons swinging, their glowing blades sparking against trees. The human dropped the rifle, pulled his knife, and charged. One raider swung at him, the blade missing by inches. The soldier ducked, drove his knife deep into the alien's side, and twisted. The giant fell, shrieking. Another grabbed him, claws digging into his armor. He struggled, slamming his head back, breaking free, then stabbed again and again until the alien collapsed. The last one fled, shouting curses into the forest. Breathing hard, the human stood among the fallen bodies. His hands shook, but he forced himself forward. The woman was still chained, her breath quick and shallow, her glowing eyes fixed on him with shock. He raised his knife and cut the ropes. She stumbled into his arms, her body trembling like a leaf in storm wind. He steadied her, confused by the way she clung to him, her fingers digging into his arm. She whispered in a soft alien tongue, words he did not understand, but the sound was filled with relief. He guided her away from the firelight, into the safety of shadows. As they moved, he noticed more figures in the distance. Villagers, hiding among the trees, watching everything. When he brought her out of the camp, the villagers stepped forward, their faces pale, their eyes wide. Instead of fear, they lowered their heads. Some dropped to their knees. Murmurs spread through them like fire. The bond has been made. The soldier frowned, confused. He looked at the alien girl, but she kept her eyes down, refusing to meet his gaze. Her cheeks glowed faintly, almost like fire beneath her skin. He tried to speak, but none of them seemed to understand his words. Still, they stepped aside, letting him and the girl pass through. Their heads remained bowed, their voices whispering the same strange phrase again and again. He had no idea what it meant. He thought maybe they were just thankful. Maybe it was their way of showing respect. He told himself it was nothing, just local culture, nothing important. But the way the girl's hand tightened around his arm said something different. She did not let go of him, even when she could walk on her own. She looked at him once, quickly, and there was something in her eyes he could not name. Fear, relief, and something else, something that made his heart beat faster. He wanted to ask her what was happening, why the villagers acted this way, but his words died on his lips. For the first time since the crash, he felt truly out of his depth. He had rescued her, yes, but he had stepped into a world he did not understand. The villagers led them into their settlement, a cluster of tall stone towers wrapped in vines and glowing symbols. Fires burned in every corner, and the smell of sweet smoke drifted through the air. As they entered, more villagers gathered, their eyes on him, their whispers growing louder. The alien woman walked beside him, her head bowed, but her grip never leaving his arm. Some of the villagers even touched their foreheads to the ground, as if he were something sacred. The human soldier felt a chill creep up his spine. This was not gratitude. This was something else. He wanted to protest, to shout that he was just a man, nothing more. But the weight of their eyes silenced him. That night, when he finally sat inside a small shelter they gave him, the alien woman sat across from him. She stared at the ground, her fingers twisting nervously. At last she raised her eyes, glowing faint blue in the dark. She whispered in broken words, just clear enough for him to understand. "You saved me. You are my husband now." The soldier blinked, thinking he had heard wrong. "Husband?" He laughed nervously, shaking his head. No, that's not what I meant to do." But she did not laugh. Her face remained serious, her voice steady. She repeated the words again, slower this time, each syllable cutting through him. "One rescue, one bride." He stared at her, heart racing, and for the first time since landing, he felt true fear. He thought he had just saved a life. He did not know he had stepped into a law older than stars, a law that would bind him in ways he never imagined. The human soldier woke to the sound of drums outside. At first, he thought it was just noise from the strange village, but when he stepped out, he saw the people gathering in a circle. Fires burned bright, smoke rising into the night sky, and all eyes turned toward him. The rescued alien girl stood close, her hand brushing against his arm as if afraid to let him go. The villagers whispered, their voices carrying the same strange phrase he had heard before. One rescue, one bride. He frowned, not understanding, but the weight of their stares pressed down on him. An elder stepped forward, tall and thin, with silver markings across his face. He raised a staff and spoke in a deep voice. The words rolled like thunder, but only some were clear to the human's ears. He caught fragments: bond, law, chosen. Then the elder pointed straight at him, then at the girl, and the villagers cheered. The human's stomach twisted. He had no idea what this meant, but the girl's cheeks glowed faintly and she lowered her eyes. Slowly, she whispered in broken human words, her voice shaking, "You cannot leave now. You saved me. You are mine." He stared at her, stunned. "Yours? Wait, no, that's not how this works." He laughed nervously, looking at the crowd. "I helped, yes, but I'm not." He stopped because every villager was watching him with absolute seriousness. Not one smile, not one laugh. Only silence, as if waiting for him to accept. He realized then this was no joke. This was their law, their truth, older than anything he knew. The alien girl stepped closer, her eyes filled with fear. "If you leave me, I die. My family, shame forever. My people, hate me, hate you." Her words were broken, but heavy with meaning. The human's breath caught. She was not saying this as a trick. She was pleading. Her voice trembled, and her fingers clutched his sleeve like a lifeline. He looked at her and saw it. She was not only afraid of him leaving, she was terrified of what her own people would do if he did. The elder raised his staff again, and the villagers began to chant. The girl whispered quickly, desperate, "One rescue, one bride. Always law. If you save, you take. No choice." Her eyes finally met his, glowing in the firelight, filled with a strange mix of sorrow and hope. He swallowed hard. He had thought he was just a survivor on a strange planet. Now he was being forced into something he never wanted, never expected. He shook his head. "This isn't fair. I didn't agree to this." His voice cracked with anger, but the villagers only chanted louder. The girl flinched at his words, her eyes watering. She whispered, "If you reject, I die tomorrow. They will throw me back to raiders. They will call me cursed." He stared at her, shocked. "What? That's insane." But the truth was clear in her trembling voice. This was their way, their tradition. It did not matter what he thought. To them, the bond was real, sealed the moment he cut her chains. The human stepped back, his mind racing. He wanted to argue, to fight, to shout that he was no one's husband. But as he looked at the alien girl, her fragile frame shaking in the firelight, he saw the truth. She was trapped by her own people's law as much as he was. If he refused, she would pay the price, not him. He clenched his fists, feeling anger burn inside him, not at her, but at this strange culture that had trapped them both. The villagers came closer, placing hands on their hearts, bowing their heads. Some of them even touched his shoulders, murmuring words he did not understand. To them, he was no longer a stranger. He was the chosen one. The girl stood beside him, silent, her hand trembling but still holding onto his arm. He wanted to pull away, but something stopped him. The way she held on, as if letting go meant death, cut deeper than any words. Later that night, when the fires dimmed, he sat alone with her inside the shelter. She avoided his gaze, twisting her hands nervously. Finally, she whispered, "You angry?" He looked at her, his voice tired. "Yes, because I don't understand. I never asked for this." She bit her lip, then said, "I never asked too, but law? Stronger than us. You saved me, now you, tied to me." Her voice broke at the last words. Tears slid down her cheeks, glowing faintly like silver under the moonlight. He stared at her, silent. She was young, afraid, and yet bound by something beyond her control. He wanted to tell her it was all a mistake, but when she whispered, "Please, don't leave me," his chest tightened. He remembered the way she looked at him in the clearing, chained, terrified, her eyes begging for life. He could not forget that. He realized then that, whether he wanted it or not, she was tied to him. And maybe he was tied to her too. Outside, the villagers still murmured, their voices soft, repeating the same words like a song. He didn't know their language, but he understood their meaning. They believed he was her protector, her husband, her chosen one. The girl leaned closer, her voice trembling. "You cannot walk away. If you go, I have nothing." He closed his eyes, torn between his own freedom and her desperate need. For the first time, he understood the trap. He had saved her life, but in this world, saving was not free. It came with a price, a bond he could never break. When he opened his eyes again, she was still watching him, her glowing eyes filled with fragile hope. He did not answer her. He only sat in silence, knowing that his life had changed forever, and there was no going back. The human sat near the fire, staring into the flames while the alien girl sat quietly across from him. Her eyes were lowered, her hands twisted together in her lap, and her breathing was shallow, like she was holding back words she dared not speak. He rubbed his forehead, exhausted, his body aching from the crash and the fight, but his mind refused to rest. He had thought saving her was an act of kindness, something simple, but now it had chained him to a fate he never wanted. He looked up at her and finally spoke, his voice rough. "I can't stay here. I have to find a way off this planet." Her head lifted slowly, and her glowing eyes met his. She whispered in broken words, each one heavy with meaning. "If you go, I am nothing. No family, no name, only shame. My people will give me back to raiders." Her voice cracked, and she quickly looked down again, as if ashamed to even say it. He felt a sting of guilt but shook his head. "It's not fair. I didn't ask for this. You didn't ask for this either. Why should we be trapped because of some old rule?" His words came sharp, but she only flinched as if each word was a blow. She whispered, softer now, "Law is stronger than us. I am yours now. If you leave, I die." He clenched his fists, anger boiling inside. He wanted to scream at the villagers, at their laws, at this entire world that had twisted his choice into a trap. But when he looked at her trembling shoulders, his anger melted into something else. Confusion, pity, maybe even fear. She was as much a prisoner as he was, tied to him because of a moment neither of them had chosen. Outside, the villagers gathered again, chanting and singing, their voices filling the night. They celebrated what they believed was a sacred bond, while he felt the walls of his freedom closing in. He stepped outside for air, trying to push away the noise in his head, but even there the villagers treated him differently. They bowed, offered him food, called him words he didn't understand but knew carried respect. It should have felt good, but instead it felt like chains tightening around him. When he returned, she was still sitting where he left her, but her eyes followed him closely. She whispered, "You hate me." The words struck him hard, sharper than any blade. He shook his head quickly. "No, I don't hate you. I don't know how to handle this." She looked at him with wide, glowing eyes, her voice small. "Then, what do you feel?" He had no answer. He wanted to tell her he felt trapped, angry, lost, but he also saw the fear in her eyes. She was not his enemy. She was just as afraid of the future as he was. He sat down again, closer this time, and said softly, "I don't hate you. I'm just confused. I came here by accident. I don't know your people. I don't know your rules. And now, suddenly, I'm supposed to be your husband. How can I accept that?" Tears welled in her eyes, and she whispered, "Because if you do not, I am dead already." Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. The sound of her quiet sobs filled the small space. The human's chest tightened, and for the first time, he saw the truth clearly. This wasn't just about him. She wasn't trying to trap him. She was begging him to stay alive, because without him, her people would destroy her. Slowly, he reached out and touched her hand. She flinched at first, but then she looked up, her eyes wet and glowing softly. He said quietly, "I don't know if I can accept all of this, but I won't let them hurt you. I promise." Her lips trembled and she nodded, clutching his hand as if it was the only thing keeping her alive. That night, sleep would not come to him. He lay awake, listening to the faint sounds of the village and the steady breathing of the girl beside the fire. His thoughts twisted between anger and duty, between freedom and the strange bond that now held him. He remembered the way she looked at him when he cut her chains, the silent plea in her eyes, the trust she had given him without question. He realized she had already given him everything. Whether he wanted it or not, she had tied her life to his. In the morning, the sun rose over the alien sky, painting the village in colors he had never seen before. The villagers came again, bringing food and gifts, bowing low, calling him words he still did not understand. The girl stood beside him, her head bowed, her hand lightly touching his arm. It felt strange, but also steadying, as if her touch kept him rooted in this new, terrifying world. When the elder approached once more, staff in hand, the villagers fell silent. He spoke in his deep, booming voice, and though the human could not understand, he felt the meaning in every word. The elder gestured to him, then to the girl, then raised his hands high. The villagers cheered. The girl whispered quickly, "Today, you prove bond. If not, they take me." The human's heart froze. "Prove? How?" She looked at him with those glowing eyes and said, "Trial. You fight. If you win, they accept you. If you lose, I am taken back." He stared at her, shock crashing through him. He had thought he was trapped already, but now the trap was closing tighter. He had to fight for her, for a bond he never asked for, in front of a whole people who believed this was law. And if he failed, she would be torn from him, doomed to the very fate he had rescued her from. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. He did not want this marriage, this bond, this burden. But when he looked at her trembling hands and the silent plea in her glowing eyes, he knew one thing for certain. He could not walk away. Not now. Not ever. The morning sun burned through the mist, and the village was alive with voices. The human soldier stood in the middle of the open ground, surrounded by tall stone walls and watchful eyes. The alien villagers had gathered from every corner, pressing close together, whispering, pointing, waiting. He felt their eyes on him like arrows. The rescued girl stood at the edge of the circle, her silver skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. Her hands were clasped tightly, her body tense, and her glowing eyes never left him. He knew she feared for him as much as she feared for herself. An elder stepped forward, raising his staff, and the crowd fell silent. He spoke in their tongue, his deep voice rolling across the courtyard. The human could not understand all the words, but he caught a few repeated ones: bond, trial, honor. The elder pointed his staff toward the human, then toward 3 alien warriors stepping out from the crowd. They were tall, their skin hard like stone, and each carried weapons unlike anything he had seen. One had a heavy axe with glowing runes, another carried a spear tipped with crystal, and the third wore claws strapped to his hands like blades. They moved with confidence, laughing at the sight of him. The human's chest tightened. He had fought before, but always with training, with weapons, with comrades at his side. Now he stood alone, with only a knife and a half-broken body. The villagers believed this trial would prove whether he was truly her protector. If he failed, the bond would break, and she would be given back to shame, maybe even death. His fists clenched. He did not choose this, but he would not let her fall. The elder struck the staff on the ground. The crowd roared. The first warrior charged, swinging his axe with brute force. The human ducked, the blade missing his head by inches and cutting deep into the ground. Using the opening, he rushed forward, slamming his shoulder into the alien's chest. The warrior stumbled, surprised at the sudden attack, and the human drove his knife into the alien's side. The warrior howled, swinging wildly, but the human slipped away, using speed instead of strength. The crowd gasped, surprised the small human was not instantly crushed. The second warrior stepped in, spinning his spear with deadly precision. The human's heart pounded. He picked up a dropped shield from the dirt, raising it just as the spear stabbed forward. The crystal tip slammed into the shield, cracking it but not breaking through. The force shook his arm, but he gritted his teeth, pushing forward, knocking the spear off balance. With a quick movement, he kicked the warrior's leg, sending him stumbling. The human threw the broken shield aside, grabbed the spear, and twisted it from the alien's grip. Then, before the warrior could recover, he jabbed the blunt end into the alien's chest, knocking the air out of him. The villagers shouted, some in disbelief, some in awe. But the third warrior was waiting. The one with claws rushed like a beast, slashing fast and wild. The human barely had time to react, the claws cutting through his uniform, scratching his arm. Pain shot through him, but he didn't stop. He ducked under another slash, rolled across the ground, and came up behind the warrior. Grabbing the spear he had taken, he swung it across the alien's back with all his strength. The warrior stumbled but didn't fall. He turned, rage burning in his glowing eyes, and lunged again. The human's breathing was heavy, sweat dripping down his face, his body screaming in pain. He knew he could not match their strength. He had to rely on something else. Endurance, stubbornness, the human will to survive. As the warrior came at him again, he dropped low, letting the claws pass above his head, then drove the spear straight into the alien's stomach. The warrior froze, eyes wide, then collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. Silence fell for a moment. Then the villagers erupted into cheers. The human stood in the center, chest heaving, blood on his arm, his knife and the broken spear still in his hands. He looked around at the crowd. Their eyes were wide now, not mocking, not doubtful. They looked at him with awe, with respect, as if he had proven something they had never believed possible. The alien girl ran forward, tears shining in her glowing eyes. She stopped just a step away, her body trembling. She wanted to throw her arms around him, but the weight of tradition held her back. Instead, she bowed her head and whispered, "You win. You save me again. Now, no one can take me." Her voice was filled with relief, but also something deeper, something she did not dare to name. The elder raised his staff high, his voice booming over the crowd. Though the human did not understand all the words, he knew the meaning. The bond was sealed. He was no longer an outsider. He was now her husband in their eyes, her protector by their law. The human swallowed hard. He had survived. He had proven himself, but the truth pressed heavy on his heart. There was no turning back now. What began as a rescue had become something far greater, something he never chose. As the villagers cheered and the alien girl looked at him with glowing eyes full of fragile hope, he realized he was no longer just a stranger on this world. He was bound by their law, by her trust, and by the fight he had won. In that moment, he understood one thing clearly. His life was no longer his own. It belonged to her, to the bond, and to the path that now stretched before them both. The night after the trial, the human sat inside the small shelter the villagers had given him. His arm was wrapped in cloth, still bleeding from the fight, but his mind was louder than the pain. He kept thinking of the crowd cheering, the elder's booming voice, and the alien girl's glowing eyes filled with tears and relief. He had proven himself, and now the villagers treated him not as an outsider, but as one of their own. Yet inside, he still felt like a prisoner. He had never chosen this bond, this marriage, this role. He had only chosen to save a life. But now, saving her had tied him to an entire people. The girl sat across from him, silent, her silver skin catching the glow of the fire. She seemed different now, calmer, but also heavy with secrets. She kept her eyes down, as if unsure whether she should speak. Finally, in a voice soft and trembling, she whispered, "You must know why they wanted me." He looked at her sharply. "The raiders?" She nodded, her glowing eyes lifting to meet his. "Yes, they come for me, not for gold, not for food. For me." Her hands shook as she pressed them to her chest. "Because I carry blood of high line. My mother was royal. My father killed. I am last of my kind." The human blinked, stunned. He had expected many things, a cursed mark, a broken law, maybe even some debt. But not this. She was of royal blood, a hidden heir, a symbol worth killing for. His heart tightened as her words sank in. Saving her had not only made him her husband in their culture, it had tied him to a royal line he did not understand. She looked away, ashamed. "I should tell before, but I fear. If you knew, maybe you run." Her voice cracked, almost breaking. "But now, you cannot. You bound." He leaned forward, anger and confusion mixing in his chest. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't you tell me? She flinched at his tone, whispering, because if you refuse, I die. They need protector. You protect. Now you not only husband, you part of throne. The words felt heavy, crushing. He wasn't just trapped in marriage, he was now pulled into alien politics, into a fight he never wanted. He pressed his fists against his knees, trying to steady his breath. Outside the shelter, voices murmured, the villagers still celebrating his victory. But behind the joy, he sensed something darker, fear, expectation, the weight of secrets. The girl leaned closer, her voice trembling but urgent. Raiders come again. Not stop, they want me. They want royal blood. If they kill me, bloodline ends. If they take me, they use me. You are shielded now. Without you, I am nothing. He stared at her, trying to process her words. He had fought wars before, faced danger, but this was different. This wasn't his war, his people, his duty. And yet, when he looked into her eyes, he saw how much she depended on him. She wasn't asking him to be a king. She was asking him not to abandon her. His voice came low, almost a whisper. So if I stay, I become part of this throne? Part of your people? She nodded slowly, fear and hope in her eyes. Yes, they already see you as protector, as husband, as leader. He leaned back, staring at the fire. The word leader felt like another chain around his neck. He had only wanted to survive the crash, to find a way home. But now, with every step, the path took him deeper into their world. The girl touched his arm lightly, her fingers cold but gentle. I am sorry, but I cannot change law, cannot change blood. Only you can keep me safe. She paused, her voice shaking. And I will stand with you, always. Her words softened his anger. She was not his enemy. She was as much a victim of her blood as he was of their law. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not a burden, but a young woman caught in a storm far bigger than herself. She had lost her family, her freedom, her safety. Now, all she had left was him. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, he said finally. If I'm your husband by your people's law, then I'll protect you. But I need you to trust me. No more secrets. She nodded quickly, her glowing eyes bright with tears. No more, I swear. For the first time, she smiled faintly, a fragile thing but real. It made something inside him soften, something he had tried to keep hard and closed. He realized that while he had been trapped by this bond, he had also been given a choice, to fight it or to embrace it. And deep down, he knew he could not abandon her. That night, as the fire burned low, shadows moved outside. He heard whispers, harsh and sharp, nothing like the voices of the villagers. He grabbed his knife, standing quickly, his heart pounding. Through the cracks in the wall, he saw figures moving in the dark, eyes glowing red. Raiders. They were already here. The girl gasped softly, clutching his arm. They come, she whispered, terror in her voice. They come for me. He tightened his grip on the knife, his jaw set. He had thought the trial was the end, but it was only the beginning. Now he understood. The raiders would never stop. They would keep coming for her, again and again, until she was theirs or dead. And by their law, by his own choice, he was now the wall that stood between her and them. As the drums of the raiders echoed through the night, the human stood ready. He was no longer just a survivor. He was her protector, her husband. And now, whether he liked it or not, part of a battle much bigger than himself. The night air was thick with smoke and the sound of war cries. The raiders poured into the village, their glowing weapons cutting through the darkness like fire. Villagers screamed and scattered, some trying to fight, others running to hide. The human stood at the center with the alien girl clinging to his arm, her eyes wide with terror. He pushed her behind him, his knife gripped tight, his heart pounding like a drum. He had faced battles before, but this one was different. This was not his war, yet he was the only shield between her and death. The first raider lunged out of the smoke, swinging a blade meant to split him in half. The human dodged, rolling to the side, then slashed upward with his knife. The blade cut into the raider's arm, and the alien howled, dropping his weapon. The human didn't stop. He drove forward, kicking the raider's chest, sending him crashing into the dirt. Another came from behind, and the human barely turned in time. The blade cut his shoulder, hot pain shooting through him, but he twisted around, using his body weight to knock the attacker down. He stabbed quickly, his movements fueled by desperation. All around, the villagers fought clumsily. Their weapons were old, their shields breaking easily under the raiders' stronger blades. They had courage, but not the skill. The human's eyes darted around, taking in the chaos, searching for a way to turn the tide. He spotted the barricades near the edge of the village, half broken, barely defended. If the raiders broke through there, the whole settlement would fall. He shouted, using his loudest voice, pointing toward the barricade. "Hold that line! Block them there!" The villagers didn't understand his words, but they followed the direction of his hand. He ran toward the weak spot, grabbing a fallen spear as he went. 2 raiders were already pushing through, their weapons flashing. The human braced himself, thrusting the spear forward with all his strength. The tip pierced one raider's chest, and the force knocked both of them back. He pulled the spear free and stood tall, blood dripping from his arm, but his eyes burning with determination. The alien girl ran after him, though he had told her to stay back. She clutched a small blade, her hands shaking. "I help," she whispered, though her voice trembled. He wanted to shout at her to go back, to hide, but when he saw her fear, he realized she couldn't. If she hid, the raiders would find her anyway. She needed to stand, just like him. He gave her a quick nod, and her glowing eyes widened with both fear and courage. The battle grew fiercer. Raiders climbed the barricades, their laughter echoing, confident they would take what they came for. The human stood at the front, shouting orders with gestures, pulling villagers into formation. He had no army, but he knew war, he knew survival. He turned their fear into strength, their scattered fight into a wall of resistance. When one fell, another stepped in. When shields cracked, he grabbed wood and stone to reinforce them. Slowly, painfully, the line held. A massive raider, larger than the rest, stormed forward. His armor glowed with red symbols, and his weapon was twice the size of the human's body. The villagers shrank back in terror, but the human stepped forward. The giant roared, swinging his blade in a wide arc. The human ducked, the wind of the swing nearly knocking him off his feet. He rushed in close, too close for the giant to swing again, and drove his knife into the raider's leg. The alien howled, trying to shake him off, but the human climbed higher, stabbing again and again until the giant toppled. The villagers cheered wildly, their fear breaking into hope. But then, out of the smoke, a group of raiders spotted the alien girl. They shouted and charged straight at her. Her eyes widened, her body freezing in terror. The human saw it, his chest tightening. Without thinking, he dropped his broken spear and ran. The distance felt endless, every step heavy with fear that he would be too late. The raiders reached her, raising their weapons. She screamed. He threw himself forward, slamming into the nearest raider, knocking him to the ground. Another swung, and the blade cut across his back, burning like fire. He ignored the pain, grabbed the girl, and pulled her into his arms. He turned his body, using it as a shield as another strike came down. The blade bit into him, but not her. She cried out, holding on to him tightly, her glowing tears staining his torn uniform. The villagers saw what happened. They saw the human, bleeding and broken, still standing in front of her, refusing to move, refusing to let anyone touch her. Something shifted in them. Their fear turned into fury. They roared, charging at the raiders with a strength they had never shown before. Together, they pushed the raiders back, forcing them to retreat. One by one, the attackers fell or fled into the dark forest, their shouts fading into the distance. Silence fell over the village, broken only by the crackle of fires and the heavy breathing of the wounded. The human sank to his knees, blood dripping down his back and arms. The alien girl knelt beside him, her hands pressed desperately against his wounds, her tears glowing brighter. "No, no, don't leave me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her body shook with sobs as she clung to him. The villagers gathered around, their faces filled with awe. They had seen him fight, seen him stand where no one else could. They murmured words that he did not understand, but the meaning was clear in their eyes. They no longer saw him as an outsider. He was their protector, their champion, their chosen one. The alien girl held him tightly, whispering again and again, "You saved me? You saved me." Her voice was weak, but full of something more than gratitude, something deeper, something she didn't dare to name yet. He closed his eyes, exhausted, but inside he felt the weight of what had happened. He had bled for her, for people who were not his own. And in doing so, he had become part of them. The battle was over, but he knew the war was only beginning. The raiders would come again, stronger and angrier. But now the villagers would stand with him, and the girl, his bride by their law, would never let him go. He had saved her once more, but in truth, they had saved each other. The fires in the village still smoldered when the morning sun broke over the horizon. Smoke hung in the air, and the ground was littered with broken weapons and the blood of fallen raiders. The human sat on a stone, his body wrapped in cloth and herbs the villagers had pressed into his wounds. His muscles ached, his back burned, but he was alive. More importantly, the girl was alive too. She sat beside him, her silver skin glowing softly in the light, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. Every time he winced, she reached out as if her touch could take his pain away. The villagers moved around them, repairing homes, carrying the wounded, cleaning the battlefield. But wherever they passed near the human, they stopped, bowed their heads, and whispered words of respect. Children peeked at him with wide eyes, hiding behind their mothers. Old men touched their foreheads to the ground. He had become something to them overnight, not just her husband, not just a protector, but a savior. The weight of their gaze pressed heavily on his chest. The elder approached, his tall staff tapping against the ground. He studied the human in silence for a long moment, then spoke in deep tones. The human could not understand the words, but the meaning was carried in the elder's expression, in the way the villagers around them bowed lower. The alien girl leaned close, whispering softly, "Elder says, you are not only husband, you are now guardian of us all." The human's heart tightened. Guardian, leader, protector. He had never wanted titles, never asked for power. He was just a soldier trying to survive. But now this entire village looked at him as if he were the wall that kept death away. He looked at the girl, searching her face for some escape, but she only nodded, her glowing eyes steady. They trust you. They believe now. You belong here. Belong. The word hit him hard. He had been a stranger since the crash, lost and alone on a world that was not his. Yet now, these people who had once feared him, who had once doubted him, looked at him as one of their own. It felt strange, heavy, but also warming in a way he had not expected. That evening, the villagers gathered in the main square. Fires burned bright, drums beat slow, and the air was filled with the scent of herbs and roasted food. The human was guided to the center, the alien girl walking beside him, her head held high. The elder raised his staff and spoke again, his voice echoing. The villagers cheered, clapping their hands, their voices rising in celebration. The girl leaned close, whispering the translation into his ear. "They name you protector husband. They say you carry bond of blood now. You are one of us." The human stood still, his chest heavy with emotions he could not name. The villagers shouted his name, though they twisted it into their own tongue. They cheered not just for him, but for her, for the bond that had saved them all. He looked at her, and for the first time since the rescue, she smiled without fear. It was small, fragile, but it lit her whole face. Later, when the crowd thinned and the fires burned low, the two of them sat alone outside the shelter. The girl's hands were folded in her lap, but her body leaned close to his, as if the space between them felt wrong. She looked at him with glowing eyes and whispered, "You rescued me once, but now we rescue each other." Her voice trembled, but it carried a strength he had never heard before. He stared at her, his chest tight. He thought of the first moment he had seen her, chained and terrified, and of the battles they had faced since. She was no longer just the girl he had saved. She was his partner now, bound to him not only by law, but by the fire they had walked through together. He placed a hand over hers, rough and scarred, and for the first time, she did not flinch or hesitate. She leaned into his touch, her body trembling slightly, and whispered, "Before, I was only a burden. Now I am strong, because you stand with me." The human looked out over the village, the people who now trusted him, the land that had once felt so alien, but now carried his blood and his fight. He realized something then. His old life was gone. The crash had taken it from him forever. But here, with her, with these people, he had found something else. A new life, a new purpose. The girl's voice was soft, but it carried more weight than any law. "You are my husband now, not just by rescue, by choice, and I will never leave your side." He felt a rare warmth spread through him, cutting through the pain, the fear, the confusion. For the first time, he allowed himself to accept it. He was no longer just a lost soldier. He was her protector, her husband, her partner in a world that had almost broken her. And together, they would face whatever came next. The night grew quiet, the last embers glowing red. He and the alien girl sat side by side, their hands still joined, watching the stars above. Somewhere in the darkness, danger still lurked, and he knew the raiders would return. But now, he was not afraid. The bond between them was stronger than any law, stronger than any blade. One rescue had changed everything. What began as a moment of mercy had bound their lives forever. He had never chosen it, but now, as he looked into her glowing eyes and saw the hope shining there, he knew he would never turn away. In that silence, with the village safe for the moment and the girl's hand warm in his, the human finally understood. He had not just saved her life. She had saved his as well.